Right now in 2025, everyone and their mom are talking about you should grow your personal brand, you should create content online because it seems to be the easiest way to generate sales and scale your high ticket info/coaching offer. Now, the issue with most people is that they look at content as like this shiny object. If they just create content, they'll magically make more sales. And that's exactly why 99% of creators never make over $1 million in a year or even get to the $500 to $1 million in a month. In this video, I'm going to go through a recording, and basically what I'm going to walk you guys through is the entire content psychology we use at our agency, Social Profit Media, scale and get to hit $1 million months. Now, I want to preface this by saying that this is not going to be some like gimmick where I'm going to share some secret or some secret strategies where if you just copy them, you'll make more money. These are really the foundational principles and basics that we use to create content and kind of build personal brands in a way that actually creates long-lasting effects and really helps you create this sort of like compounding effect. So with that said, I'm gonna transition over into the video. It'll be super tactical. It will super based on like principles, because if you learn the principles, you will learn how to create content. So I'm gonna switch it over now to the video recording of this mastermind talk that I gave. And really it'll be very tactically focused and very principles based because, we believe that if you understand the principles and you know how to apply them, that's when you're equipped with the tools that you need in order to succeed at the branding and content game. Now, there's 3 things you're not going to learn here, okay? You're not going to learn a secret hack to go and scale your coaching company to $1 million a month in the next 90 days. You're also not going to get some magic shout out formula to get 10K followers overnight. I hate to disappoint. There's also not going to be no turbocharged viral 3-step formula. There's going to be 4 things I'm going to cover today, which is number 1, really like the holistic or like psychologically based way to build a personal brand where you can attract, nurture, and convert people on a day-to-day basis. 2, I'm just go down 3 types of content. You need to actually go and facilitate that. And this content right now generates our clients over 3 million a month combined. Next, we're going to show you how to actually close people in terms of getting them to sell themselves to you or your program. And lastly, I'm going to do a quick little breakdown of $1 million a month personal brand that we work with right now. Sound fair enough? Yep. Sweet. All right, how to actually build a personal brand. And so I want to kind of take this very much down because I think it's been a bit of a watered down concept at this point. Ultimately, people seek sort of guidance and solutions to their problems, right? And they usually go for that on social media. And these days, you guys, obviously a lot of other creators, they kind of provide those. And ultimately, for you to be able to leverage that to grow your business, you need to sort of become their hero, right? And we all look up to them and we have our own little heroes that we use. And really the power for all of them lies in having an audience. And so that's what we're going to cover here. And so the 3 things you need to actually grow your personal brand is you need someone to know, like, and trust you. These are the 3 key efforts. You don't need to have a Lambo, a fancy watch, or any of that, right? It's just 3 key things that they need. And so at this point, Instagram, compared to like a lot of the other platforms, sort of like a reality TV show, right? You obviously have stories, feed posts, and all that good stuff. But you can see on a day-to-day basis, okay, what is James up to? What is Bastian up to, right? What are they doing? You can share learnings. You can share like valuable concepts that you're learning. All that stuff really feels like you're just, kind of keeping up with the Kardashians per se. And what it does at its core is it really, kind of creates a close-up relationship. I think one name that's populating around, like Iman Ghazi, right? He's built this massive personal brand, not because he talks about his like Lambos or whatnot. It's because he's documented his journey or just shared snippets of his life for the better part of like 5+ years. And so that's really what Instagram serves for. Now, I want to just quickly frame you guys and show you guys the methodology that we use within our agency and when we work with clients. And so really the core concept of everything is content, right? Whether that's feed content, story content, that's the core part of everything. From there, we want to test how we can drive traffic from our content to drive conversions, whether that's through VSL leads or whether that's through DMs, okay? And then the last thing is traffic, right? So at that point, once we know that, okay, we post organic content and that leads to sales, all right, let's amplify that, whether that be shout out, Instagram ads, or just other traffic methods. That's when we amplify it up. And that's what most people get wrong. They think that shout outs is the big thing or like Instagram ads are the big thing. And they focus on the traffic component instead of the actual content. And really the big issue is most personal brand content looks like this. And if we're being quite frank here, it looks pretty shit and it doesn't look personalized, right? And so it's generic and dull, right? It's to me at least, it's very cringe. And it lacks the very nature of knowing, liking, and trusting someone, which is having personality, showing why you're unique. It's, basically copy and paste for most people in the space. And at the end of it, there's no real value to it. Or as Paul just went in depth on it, It has no story or personal reason why people should follow you. And so I just want to give you guys a small reminder. People, no matter how convinced you are that your product or service is that amazing, when you run a personal brand or you use Instagram, YouTube, whatever to sell stuff, people buy you and the transformation and the person that you are, not necessarily your products and service. Right? I personally didn't buy an agency program because I thought, wow, a marketing agency is so amazing. No, I just wanted to have the lifestyle that came from it. Then the three traits of a personal brand is really like you want to have value first. So the biggest thing is like a lot of people, they have dreams, hopes, insecurities, or fears, right? We want to address those through content because it gives people value. If I watch a piece of content where somebody talks about focus and it's something that I internally really struggle with, that to me comes across as really valuable, which now that person has some form of authority over me when I, continue to watch them. Second of all, it is personality driven. This is something that really Hormozy popularized a lot. It's like, it's not the you should do this, it's I do this, right? Because it doesn't feel like I'm lecturing you guys on what to do. It feels like, hey, I'm just telling you what works for me, which again, from a sales perspective, it feels less salesy and it feels more like, oh, this person's just, sharing what works for them. Next up is just a strong and relatable story, right? Paul, for example, great example, is a really strong story. A lot of the marketing or content that we do for him centers around that. It's been our most viral stuff as well. It's because people relate to him. It's whether I've been burnt out, whether it's I came from an immigrant family. It's those type of angles that people really strongly resonate with and what separates you apart from the 99 other people that are trying to sell the same thing as you. And then lastly, you need to be unique, right? So I think a big thing in this space is sort of like, oh, this person did X, therefore I'm going to do the exact same thing, right? Oh, Iman's doing 4-day challenges, let's do this. Oh, Andrew Tate's doing red pill content, let's do a red pill podcast, right? It's like, it's pretty brain dead, and it's the number one way how you're never going to see any success with your personal brand. And obviously, ultimately, what you want to do, and this is something nobody talks about, is that different content attracts different people. So for example, if I post lifestyle flexes where I just go and show Lambos, watches, travels, and all that stuff, I'm attracting a certain kind of audience that wants that thing, right? Which means usually they're, I hate to say it, a bit less educated, which makes it harder to sell. Whereas if you post a lot of like subject matter expert stuff, giving the app that expertise, it attracts a highly qualified audience that actually wants to buy your stuff and is more educated from the get-go. Now, you might think of this and be like, wow, okay, like this somewhat makes sense or doesn't make sense, but how do I now map my personal brand that? Okay, we're going to do that in, 3 simple steps. And obviously you guys can just write them down, and then tonight, if you already have it, then that's great for you. Map them out. Number one's your origin story. Paul spoke about this, right? It's a really key concept because ultimately what you always want to lead with if you sell through your personal brand is, I went from this, which is a state where you were at, that your target audience is at, to this, which is like the transformation, right? Paul went from burnt out cop, 9-to-5er to where I'm at now, right? Financially free. The second thing is like accomplishments. Ultimately, I say that Lambo shouldn't be a flex, but you want to flex a bit. I mean, it's worked really well for us in terms of you have an accomplishment that seems crazy to the average person, that people are like, wow, this like can't comprehend that. You want to flex it, right? You had the rags to riches story, talk about it. You have, financially freedom, like cool. I mean, I think Jaime, one piece of content that sticks out from you was like taking your granddad for a spin in the Rari, right? Like it's stuff like that people can visualize themselves doing, and they want to do it themselves. And I think that really attracts good people. The next thing is like challenges, right? I think in this space, a lot of people just talk about how amazing they are. Like, oh, hey, look how rich I am and how great I am. But not a lot of people show the downsides of it. It's the, hey, I struggled with this, or like I actually faced this trauma or whatever. Talking about those things is, pretty important. Now, the downside with that, and I want to mention it, just don't make this a pity party where you're like, oh, I struggled with this, or like, just fall down to like saying the most atrocious stuff just to get attention, because that quickly goes back to being cringe. And ultimately, it's the opinions you hold. So, I mean, Tate obviously became very famous with this, but it's not necessarily that only. It can be stuff as, if you believe the 401k in the US is an absolute scam, talk about it and make sense of it. Don't just say it's a scam and it's stupid. Instead, you should stake it in crypto. Like, yeah, nobody's going to take you serious, right? But your opinion needs to be a compelling argument that actually makes sense and can be comprehended by the average educated individual. Now, the second thing is 3 pillars. The reason I bring this up is key because people just talk about these random things. Oh, I'm going to post about self-development. I'm going to talk about like real estate. Then I'm doing a deep crypto dive, and then I'm gonna talk about like becoming a high value man or high value woman. No, it doesn't work like that, right? Your brand needs to be sort of like this chart here. You need to have 3 topics, and they all need to somewhat intersect with each other. I'm gonna give you a great example of James. He's in the Airbnb space, and he sort of ties all these 3 topics together. And so for him, the 3 things are family, right? He's huge on spending time with his kids, spending time with his wife, having a good relationship. So that's really one pillar. Second one is real estate, whether that's buying property, bad practices in real estate, or just that type of stuff. And number 3, personal finance. Now, what you realize is that they all tie into this very same thing, right? Kind of what people want. And what you got to understand is like, if you just talk about real estate, the total addressable market that you can get off of just real estate is really small. But personal finance, which is a much bigger sector, right? You can reach more people, and they all kind of want the same thing still. So you can actually reach a broader audience or a bigger audience as a whole by having 3 subtopics that all confine to the same thing. And now the way this looks is, a few good examples is, for example, Tom Cruise, for those who don't know him, he's basically doing Section 8. He flexes like his cars, he flexes his yacht, he flexes all that stuff, but he all brings it back into the one topic, which is buy Section 8 properties so the US taxpayer finances your things, right? And so it's having these type of messages that whatever you talk about makes sense and comes back to the same connotation is incredibly crucial. Or another one of our clients, Robert Oliver, he talks about e-com a lot. He talks about potential Amazon brands. He talks about like how a man should behave or whatever in 2024. He talks a lot of these things, and he ties it back into like building generational wealth and becoming like, and actually making something out of your life. So once again, all these things there, they kind of combine together and have like this North Star that you can orient yourself on. I'll skip the last 2. I mean, Hormozi doesn't really need an introduction, right? He has his own persona, the gym, the business, all that stuff. It really fits into the overall brand image that he's giving away. And now let's put this into action for a second, okay? So when you want to take your story, right? Let's say, and you want to create it into compelling content, you got to be able to articulate yourself. And it can't just be like, hey guys, I was really poor and I'm really rich and yeah, buy my course, right? It's not really how it works, but it's sort of like taking them on a journey. So, if you look at Paul's thread here, which basically like my staff member, he became homeless after investing in real estate. For weeks he was living on the streets, and then he made this amazing transformation. Now, one, it could be people who financially aren't in a good position, right? You could have people that invested into real estate, or it could just be someone who was an employee and was in a shit situation. There's 3 target avatars you can target with one little hook. And so from there, it obviously reaches people a lot quicker. And if you tell the story in an interesting way and have a clear put outcome where, in this case, ATMs are the big thing that like get you out of the rut. People will walk away thinking like, oh shit, maybe for me, ATM is the best vehicle to kind of go about. And so it's the same thing here, right? You just want to create that content where people start to weigh your opinion more. So a great example that I like to give is I could copy every single one of Hormozi's videos step by step, word for word. It would not get any of the reach or any of the conversions because I'm not Hormozi, right? Because there's context to it. Whereas if you continuously share your story out, when you give a certain kind of advice or you put out certain kind of content, a lot of people will go like, oh shit, that actually makes sense because of this context. And so that's why, your story is essentially key. Same expertise and authority. It's you want to show that you're successful and you want to back it up with numbers. A lot of people just say like, hey, I became a millionaire, but they're not willing to do the breakdowns. Hey, let me show you a transparent booking of your Airbnb. Let me actually go and see a tax return, right? In like the sales industry. Let me see those hard facts and breakdowns that actually show how you're making that money. It's easy for me to go and say, hey guys, I made 10 mil last month, right? And I'm gonna just talk about it and I'm gonna be real credible. But if somebody asks for my bank statement, it shows I didn't, right? You want to prevent that because that's just one thing that the industry is cracking down on hard right now. And you want to be able that whatever you say, you can back up because otherwise you're going to get busted just like that. And that's really the 2 things. The last thing is personality. You don't just have to be this like boring person that just talks about the business model or whatever. You can be funny, right? I think we had this one guy who had a junk removal company, which is probably like the worst business I could imagine starting. But he basically looked at it and he was like, my granddad used to say, one man's trash is another man's treasure. And he made a lot of people laugh. And it went pretty viral because people thought like, that's actually funny. And a lot of people with that had to admit themselves like, shit, if I want to be successful and I'm too cool to pick up people's trash, then am I really serious about success? And so, just the personality stuff gets a lot of people actually out of ruts, or it gets them closer to you where they're like, yep, this is the person I'm going to listen to. And so when they listen to you, you can tell them, you are dumb if you don't buy my program. And they're going to be like, I don't want to be dumb, so I'm going to buy your program. And that's the ultimate goal here. Now, when it comes to all that stuff, it might be a bit overwhelming, but really from a holistic perspective, we have 3 types of content that we want to post for our clients and in general for you to go and attract, nurture, and convert people. Because we all know it's not just like somebody sees a video or a post and they're like, yep, I'm gonna go invest 5K, 10K into a coaching program, right? So it needs a bit more than that. The 3 ones are really like this. They do content, followers, sales. So they post a piece of content, they hope to get followers off it, and then they have 2 or 3 setters or VAs that just harass the living shit out of every person who's liked a piece of content, which it might get you to like 20, 30, 40K, but it's not really going to go get you to like that 100, 300, 500K marks, right? So here's kind of what we do is we have 3 types of content, which is top of funnel, middle of funnel, and bottom of funnel, right? So the lead gen aspect is by the time somebody sees a lead gen post, they hopefully, or when they respond to one, they hopefully have consumed a few, middle of funnel content and have definitely found us from the top of funnel. Now, let's go and break that down because I personally always fucking hate it when people threw these terms around because it's just so vague. I had no clue what it meant and we just kind of found it out through like data analysis. But really top of funnel content is like attracting new people. So when you think about it, like if you just draw an imaginary big circle, that's like the total market in like the biz up, make money online space, right? So you want to create content for that massive segment. Well, and to create content for that massive segment, you got to do a transformation because that's what people love to watch on social media. You got to create like the, financial outcomes or that type of stuff where half of the normies go, ha, that's cap. I'm going to go and hate on you in the comments. Or people go, oh, that's so inspiring. Like, let me share some love, right? You really want to have like those 2 polarizing options. Paul is so kindly and does us a favor and usually argues with people in the comments or claps back, which really helps the engagement. But as a whole, you really want to go and have content that gets people in and they don't need to know about it. Because if all you're doing is like, hey, here's how my Airbnb property makes this much money, a lot of people might get confused, like, hey, here's how my SMMA client paid me 20 grand last month. It's going to confuse people. You really got to pick them up where they're like problem unaware, solution unaware, they have no clue. And, it's interesting to the normies. From there, you want to nurture people, which is like when they follow you, they think, okay, this person may have something, but, there's a lot of people that may have something. So I kind of want to filter that out. And from there, you want to kind of create content that actually adds value to them. Or let's say 2 of my friends, they run an SMMA coaching program and they have a different way of like doing lead gen. So it's like, okay, break down your lead gen method, like give away a shit ton of value where people be like, holy shit, other people charge for this much money. Let me actually go give this away. Because you got to remind yourself, 95% of people, you can give away your entire course for free. They're not going to take action. It's just, one of those things where people love to consume, but not to take action. And if you can show them that what you've showed them in top of funnel actually works, it has substance and, can actually change their lives, they're actually going to start warming up to the idea of, oh, this is actually like pretty cool. And that leads us to the bottom of funnel. This is Bass's favorite by far because he posts it like given every single day. It's what we call like a 2-step lead gen, right? It's at this point, you want to just be super flagrant in terms of like, listen, if you want X outcome, just freaking raise your hands, right? Or you can do it in a bit of a more hidden way, which is actually something I'm going to dive in a bit deeper, which is a lot of people now have created this little barrier where they either put a thread, which is like a carousel on Instagram, and they provide a ton of value. And then at the end, there's like a, hey, DM me whatever keyword. And, let's see if we can work, which is a bit more hidden because it doesn't feel like you're selling on the front end. Or, which is a recent trend, is a lot of guys that create these videos or like threads and then they say, hey, comment whatever keyword, and I'm gonna go and send you this resource, which is genius for 2 ways. Well, number one, you get much more comments, right? And then you obviously make your shit pop off if it's good. And number 2, what actually happens is you can have ManyChat automatically send a DM. I know most of you guys know this, but if you send something like a Notion doc or whatever, which is my personal favorite, it really feels human to people, which means they're going to opt into your email funnel. So now you can harass them through emails. But number 2, what you can do is you can literally start this conversation of like, hey, I had a chance to like check out my ebook, or hey, how was the training for you? Did you enjoy that? And you start this like regular conversation where you gradually ascend them to a sales conversation, but they don't even know it's happening, right? Because
we're in this digital marketing world where we see that that's a clear lead gen post. For people, they're like, oh, this guy's giving like crazy value, right? I think to me it was puzzling because I study this a lot. You know, Iman's running these 4-day challenges, and everyone in the internet space goes, okay, here we go, another round, right? And in the comments on YouTube, half the people are like, oh my God, he's so generous. Like, how's he giving all this stuff away for free? He's not even selling anything. And so it just shows you that the average consumer has zero clue what's going on. And so you really want to take advantage of that and kind of prey on them in a sense. Sounds bad, but that's just the name of the game. Now, really, I don't think there's a perfect ratio. You know, I think if you had 100,000 followers come in the last month, you want to obviously adjust that, right? You can't just have a perfect ratio of like nurture to attraction to conversion content. But personally speaking, what we like to do with agency clients is 60% top of funnel. So you can really focus on like getting people in, 30% middle of funnel, and 10% bottom of the funnel. Now, there's one thing I kind of left out or forgot to put in, but a key step in that, especially the middle and bottom of the funnel, are stories, right? And I'm gonna just quickly move you guys over here. And so what usually happens is from an algorithmic standpoint is like somebody becomes like a follower, right? Then they kind of see your content. Sorry for my bad handwriting, but so they start seeing your content, right? At this point, like they sort of know who you are, but they still don't know whether they should trust you or you know what they should do. Now, whenever they, you know, either like, save, or like just comment, right? It shows the algorithm that like, hey, this person's actually interested in my stuff, which means they see more of your content. And the more they invest with your content over time, they're going to be shown your stories. And what happens is when they show you the stories, right, it's really sort of the intimate part. You want to really just document your life. You don't just want to put up a daily post, hey, looking for 5 more people, right? Because at that point, you add zero value to them. And this is really like sort of your fans, right? Those are the people that take time to watch your content. They've really engaged with stuff. And so by leveraging your stories properly, and if they watch them every single day, they're going to pop up. If you open Instagram, they're going to pop up on the very left side. So you're going to pop up on the very left side every time you post your stories, which means you're going to get more views, which means when you actually pitch, you're going to get a ton more DMs as well. And so with that, you really want to use the stories to sort of like feed into like the whole, this is what I'm doing, here's how I'm running my business, here's the results I'm getting, and just all of that good stuff where like you give them an extra 5, 10 opportunities to say this one thing that they really resonate with, right? It can be, and it sounds really stupid saying, but even when you do a Q&A and like you respond to a Q&A, we have people like messaging like, oh my God, like, thank you so much for taking the time to respond. Like it was a bloody setter that did the responding. But for them, it's like a wow, like this person took the time to respond to me and he really creates like hardcore relationship. Now, when I say this, I just want to make something clear. This is not something you do it for a month and it works, right? This is something where you do it for 3, 6, 9, 12 months and it's really going to pay into fruition because it's something that grows exponentially, not just linearly. Now, let's scale it and do what we did here, which is our really the basics, level 1, with the right efforts, right? And there's really 2 mistakes that I generally see, whether that's with clients, whether that's with other people in the space, that they're making. Which is number 1, lack of leads, right? They don't get enough followers, they don't get enough traction, they don't have anything pop off. And number 2, this is something we're seeing within the agency, sales teams. Horrendous sales teams, you know, fat cat closers that refuse to get on with leads, that have less than 50K and verbally agree to the purchasing price already, right? It's my favorite type of calls. But those are really the 2 big calls. And we're just going to quickly address that. Now, my biggest thing is people start and they go straight into shoutouts because shoutouts are the hottest thing, right? Our entire business runs off of shoutouts. You know, we're fairly decent at them, I guess. But really for us, the biggest validation of it comes from organic content. If you can't get your stuff, and I think Bass agrees probably with my philosophy there, if you can't get an offer from 0 to 100K per month with organic, 1, you might be a shitty marketer, or 2, you might just not quite have the perfect offer, which means you need to tweak your stuff, right? You can get at least on a very easy basis, regardless of your niche, offer servings, to 50K per month. But unless you're a top 1% creator, the organic side will never truly scale for you. Now, with that said, the solution is not shoutouts, just to be very clear here, okay? It just feels like that every person that does shoutouts just thinks that that's the holy grail, right? It's kind of like with Facebook ads where people are like, oh, if I just run Facebook ads, like my business is going to scale drastically. And what you need to understand with shoutouts is you borrow someone's audience, which means essentially it's just a reflection of the broader people's opinion. Meaning if your baseline content sucks, if you have bad content that gets zero engagement and people don't like it, shoutouts are not going to fix that. It's kind of like if you have bad ad creatives, spending more money on it is probably not going to help you out. And so, you can have the biggest budget budget on planet Earth and still not make sense. So you really want to master the basics first, which again, just bringing it back to what I said in the beginning, master the organic side of contents, right? Where you have good reels, which probably bring in a lot of your traffic, right? You have good threads, which are really great for nurturing conversion. And like some tweets or memes, which just make people laugh, kind of build your personality, right? And show you're an actual human being. From there, you want to then leverage stories and your feed content to drive inbound leads. And then once you have those basics in, once you actually get that part and you get sales off of it, start amplifying it. This can be shoutouts, but I'm being very honest with you guys. It's pretty hard out there. You need to have a full-time team running this. Otherwise, you're probably going to burn money unless you want to have basic creatives. But there's other really good avenues that we've kind of discovered. So, some niches, videographers or like barbers, there's different niches out there. They don't work with shoutouts. Simple as that. But if you want to amplify the chronics, you can just boost your best performing content, right? You can do story shares. Like if let's say you have an e-com and you have a bunch of people that have an e-com interested audience, you can just have them share your content on their story and kind of boost the algorithm that way. Or you can do simple story ads where it's basically like, hey, my name's X, I've achieved whatever outcome you've achieved, and I'm breaking down everything that school is not teaching you, right? If you want to learn more, just check out my profile for more. So super simple ways to amplify it. Because I want to give you 2 reminders. You should focus on what matters most, right? Unless you have like a good team, right, which is hard to find but doable, or if a good agency, you are probably going to struggle to get really, really top-notch results. Because I don't think anyone here is like happy with like, 50K months or whatever in the long run. We want to go to like the big numbers, right? And the second thing is like, as a business owner, you also shouldn't be out here like writing threads and like, basically like trying to coordinate with like these shout out pages. You should just be focused on like a growth strategy that takes 20, 30 minutes a day, unless you're like already deep in the game, and really focus on that to compound. And number 2, this is an amplifier. Content is 80%, everything else is 20%. So really for you guys, and there's a few guys in the room who are doing it really good already. You want to get freaking good at content first, where like you get the basics, you get the avatar you're advertising to, you get the pillars that you nailed down, and you get the way of like you can talk on camera. For myself, I've obviously done it for clients a lot. I recently started pushing my personal brand more, and oh my God, am I shit on camera. Like every time I sit down, it feels like I'm just in therapy session. I hate every minute of it. But I think it's just a natural thing that you're going to, right? I mean, I remember Paul, the first 3 videos we recorded, we came back and we sat there internally being like, yeah, like we got to go lifestyle rocks. Like the video presence ain't cutting it right now. But yeah, like it's not easy, right? But it takes time to actually go and master it. And that's really something that a lot of people aren't willing to go and do because they're just looking for these shortcuts because we're trying to do everything fast and within the next 30 days. And so before we move on, I just wanted to quickly make sure you need to create 3 types of content. If you're starting out, you have no clue, I'm just giving you 3 little ones that you can do, right? Which is 1, transformations. And please just don't copy it word for word, bar for bar. That'd be much appreciated. But it can be as simple as like, hey, how I went from situation A to situation B. It can be a 5-year time lapse where you do 2015, 2016, whatever, and you just gradually show your evolution, knowing that that's the evolution that your target audience actually wants to follow, right? Those are super simple. They honestly work like a charm. The biggest thing, once again, try to really find your unique way of making them work, unique visuals, unique wording. That's really how you're going to stand out. Number 2 is expertise. Honestly, from there, just a simple business breakdown. Like, I mean, for us, it worked really well on the Airbnb side, just breaking down properties, right? If you're running an SMMA, if you're running like a remote closer option, like breaking down how they're going to make money, simplifying it for them where they truly understand how the process works. The simpler, the better, because most people, they're not, intelligent enough to comprehend everything. Last thing, opinions. This is James' specialty. So the reel that you're seeing over here, it's gotten over 40 million views. If you're a hardcore UK citizen, you might not want to watch it because you're going to get really upset about it. But it's basically just ruffling feathers, right? Opinioning why leaving UK is the best thing ever. And the second thing is just, popularity stuff. Like people think that buying a house is the best thing ever. We went, well, it's actually a shitty investment to make. And it really gets people going. Again, important to make an articulate point about it. But if you can really state your opinion in a way that it pisses off the non-buyers, right? Like, and I'm gonna be very frank here. We don't advertise to poor people. We advertise to people that have money or have a job. That's really who we want to advertise to. And so I'm okay if all the normies and poor people hate on James or hate on, any of our clients. It's fine because they're giving us more reach. And all actually the rich people, or like the people that are great fits, right? They're going to be like, heck yeah, I should be in Dubai too. Why am I not in Dubai? Right? Like, why am I not in X position? And so that's really something to deal as well with hate. You're always going to get hate. Just make sure you get hate from the people that are not going to be buyers. Now, I want to give a last little trick. Are you guys ready for that one? Sweet. Now, I want to pre-frame this by saying, ultimately, Bas is still the expert in this, but I call this the DM indoctrination process. We do this a bit different just because with us, we sometimes have really high volume when stuff goes viral. And I personally just hate seeing a low-performing sales team. So I've kind of just started playing around with setters quite a bit myself. Now, the regular process is you get a DM, you give a quick little qualification, right? You book them on a triager call, and then you get them on sales calls. Personally, I try to abolish that with every single client as soon as possible. If Paul does it, then he's the exception because they have their stuff dialed in since day one. But I really hate that because from a tech perspective, from like, all these other things, it's so much complexity. And like in a world where everyone's pushing, you just lose too many leads. So that's one thing I've personally pushed to abolish. What we do is 50% of CTAs are actual CTAs in terms of like, hey, looking for 5 more people, or like, hey, if you want to make money, just DM me right now. Because they still work, right? Still good hand raisers, but I don't want to push them too much. Whereas the other 50%, we're pushing heavily on like just value-based stuff. Like, hey, get this free ebook, right? Get this free training that I've done. I've just done a live training, like, you just do all that stuff that kind of gets people in. They get value first, so that then you can build up their relationship in the aftermath and close people in. Now, the second thing is sort of like we like to ask familiarity of stuff. And again, there's some nuance to this, right? This could be location, but I like to ask familiarity for one simple reason. So to give you guys context, we have this one guy, e-com offer, and we started just asking people, how familiar are you with stuff? And then when they say, I have no clue, I just saw you flexing, so I just wanted to check out what's more. We don't continue the conversation. We send them a VSL because one of two things are going to happen. We know that the VSL is structured in a way that if they are a good fit and they're actually a buyer type, they're going to watch at least 80% of the video where we actually pitch, and then they're going to book a call. Now we're booking around with this method on low traffic volume, about 4 to 5 calls every single day. And you'd wonder right now, yeah, you're gonna have unqualified, you're gonna have the, no disrespect, you've got the third world countries in there. You actually don't, because they have a low attention span. They actually drop out really early on, and they're like, yeah, I'm not watching this video. This seems too competent. Whereas in our case, a lot of people that actually, want to learn, they're serious and they have the money too, they actually book through that, and we get pretty decent like show out rates. It's maybe 10% unqualified, but I personally can live with that really well. And then for those who say they are familiar, we just send with the process. The cool thing about this is by putting the VSL and sort of the option to book right at the beginning and putting the barrier of video in there, we actually book more calls because we don't need to wait for them to respond to us all the time, right? Which is like my biggest pet peeve with setters is they're not fast enough and then they're too generic. Now, the next thing is, and if somebody can solve this and you have $1 million business at your hands, is teaching them common sales and emotional intelligence. It's, for example, a good example that I've seen is some prospects, they come in very cocky, right? They come in and think they're the shit, like just as Paul, I think, said earlier, like they know everything. And you want to basically take that away from them. So what we've done is when they give us really short answers, we just like give them a response, something like, okay, cool. Well, I'm not sure. You don't really sound serious about this. And it honestly spirals them like crazy because they feel like their ego is attacked and they're actually starting to sell themselves really hard. So they go from like 2 words, 3 words responses to like full-blown essays, what they want, and they actually really work well. So it's kind of like teaching them not to go and be desperate, right? Because you got to understand that from a status perspective, we're supposed to be up here and the prospect's supposed to be down here. They want to get up to us. So we can't be chasing them down with like question marks, like did you get this? And like kind of like follow up 10 times in a row, at least for the offers that we have majority on. We can't do that because it lowers the status of the client, which then when they book a call is really hard to like sort of ascend that, right, on the sales call. And then that's pretty much it. Now, the last thing, and I'm gonna run through this because I know otherwise you guys can't eat, is just one of our clients. His name's Jeremy Miner. We've worked with him for about 2.5 years at this point. He's consistently pulling in at least $1 million a month. And I just want to run you guys so you can sort of see this actionized in one thing through his brand, right? So his positioning is super simple. He's probably the most knowledgeable or like the most established sales rep in the space. So naturally we were like, right, let's do it authority-based. Now, Little disclaimer, if you make 20, 30K per month for your actual business, it's pretty respectable. But I think the subject matter expert angle there is pretty tough to take, right? Just to put it out there. And so basically we were like, okay, we're not going to focus on like flexing cars, flexing watches, because I think he's also 40, so it'd be a bit weird. And so, we basically focus just on giving value. What are the skills that he's learned? What are common downfalls? I just honestly, the whole shebang. You guys can check out his stuff, but it's just super value driven. And from there, he just built up this thing where he has a strong frame, and again, it was flexing authority. He has more experience, so we can leverage the experience. Because if he shows, I've been in all these situations, here's how I've handled them, it naturally gives you more exposure and it gives you more credibility when you actually say, this is wrong what you're doing, you need to use this, right? What we did for him is like, we gave honestly a lot of like the objection handling, the how to cold call, like all this stuff, we just gave away in free content and like templates. Because people were like, okay, cool, I have this sorted. Now I have this new problem. Okay, so I've sorted the objection handling, but I still don't close deals because of X. Well, now they're coming back to Jeremy because he's obviously helped them overcome that first obstacle, and it makes the sale 10 times easier, right? So that's really how we sort of approach the content. And once again, this is not something where we do 5 pieces of content on subject matter expert, right? And it's golden, everyone wants to buy. This is 2 years of doing this consistently. And the last thing on the monetization expert is obviously just simple. Last slide of a thread, see in the DMs, stories, same thing. The one thing that we really, really, really drove home at first was one of his old setters used to just go and have a bunch of podcast episodes, a bunch of YouTube videos. And when people struggle with problem X, they would get an episode or a YouTube video. So like, once again, the big theme here is like they nurture the living shit out of people in the DMs. The surprising thing is people will actually consume that stuff and still be open for the sales conversation. A lot of people think if you give away too much early, they're too cold. At somewhat, give away from that a bit. But the biggest thing is here to note, he makes a crap ton of money, not because, wow, we're so amazing, we're driving all this traffic. No, his sales team naturally, or I hope at least, is really good in terms of like their setters are KPI driven and they're, getting their stuff done. They're rocking and loading, right? And like the sales team is obviously closing deals. And I think that's the biggest thing is like where you need to go and bring down for yourself to go and scale. You need to bring down marketing and sales. We've recently started doing that with James a lot more because we had some things we could optimize. And we started to chat more with the head of sales in terms of like, hey, what angle works well? What do you guys see on the sales side? And interestingly enough, he brought out that they have a lot of like 50-year-olds, 55-year-olds who are like, hey, like I'm kind of make money, but I still don't have time, right? And I want to bridge that. And so for us, it was like, oh, we can actually go and bridge that by creating content of like how he would retire his parents, or like, how can we go and address the 55-year-old crowd? Because they come in pretty cold because they probably don't want to move to Dubai, right? They don't want to, like have a nice car, like nice house, whatever. They just want to be financially free. And so by having that bridge where you have marketing and sales communicate with other, not bitch at each other, which is like a big difference, right? Not just the closers and setters complain to marketing and vice versa, but actually having to communicate with each other and hold them to a high standard, you can really scale out a lot because you're seeing angles that you haven't untapped. You see patterns that are really valuable to see. And all in all, that's really one thing that they do internally a lot well, which helped the scale. Now, why this works so well is because your followers gain, they don't turn into followers right now, right? We've seen it where when we take on clients, it takes 2-3 months for the followers we gain to turn into prospects, right? Because they see the content, they need to engage with it. They need to really sell themselves, because if they see that like, yo, like James is printing, they're traveling, kids are doing cool stuff, F1, this, that, right? They're gonna be like, damn, like, why am I not doing this? Like, people go and Paul stuff, right? They go and hate a bit, and they're like, God, he's bought like another car, like God, another like house, like this sucks. I'm still poor, right? Like they're starting to reshape their mindset, and that takes time. Where like they're like, oh, now it's time for me to go and take action. And really, you build trust through consistency. It's the same as in the gym. It's the same as, I guess, in relationships. It's you build over time. The more consistent you are with showing up for your audience daily, showing up, with value where you actually nurture them, the better your conversion is going to be over time. I think that's the biggest thing that I've learned in this game is we can do the quick reaps. There's always going to be, the low-hanging fruits, but really building longevity in this entire thing is really how you're able to scale. Last thing is, as I said, people have FOMO. If they realize like the world's going to shit, the UK is falling apart, whatever, and like, oh, they're leaving. How are they able to leave? Oh, they're able to leave because of Airbnb. Well, shoot, I need to do Airbnb, right? Because I want to have the same goal. And so you really want to be consistent and like show stuff. I'm not saying to go and say, oh, I'm amazing, I'm way better than you. No, that doesn't really work, right? But you want to just be really humble in like saying how grateful you are to be in the position you're in. Just kind of take that angle of like, hey, look what I'm doing on a day-to-day basis. That's going to create that funnel pretty much on autopilot. And lastly, if they message you, which means they're like lead or like whatever, they just message you, comment, and then they reach back out, be like, hey, like, do you have a paid program? That's the most powerful frame because once again, the status difference is high and they're aware. They're aware that like where you're at is where I want to be and you have what I need. So it makes an easier sell, right? Obviously, you need to still make sure they're qualified, yada yada. But that's really sort of the most powerful thing. Now, that's everything from my end. All this kind of gives you a good overview of like how to build a personal brand. This is not some get rich quick thing, right? It's a how you can actually build a sustainable and, you know, sort of like evergreen funnel that's going to get you sales, get you customers, but also, and this is most importantly, get you a ton of other benefits. You know, I mean, I've seen this with my mini brand where if we need people to unban accounts, if we need closers, setters, you know, you name it, there's a lot of leverage. I mean, you know, a lot of our clients have seen it. I mean, people getting free passes, free access, right? Networking opportunities with pretty wealthy people. You get access into rooms that you don't have if you have a decent personal brand. And to sort of bring it back to the beginning, some of the generic stuff I showed you, I can tell you already now, if a billionaire sees that, he's not going to be like, wow, this person's real cool. I got to connect with him. No, they don't care, right? But if they see that you have a unique story, they see that you have unique value to give, they're probably going to be more interested in actually connecting with you. Appreciate it, guys.